This is Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app. Now, live from the Matt Black Kia Studios.
Oh, what a move!
Here's Josh Hennig.
Philadelphia Eagles finally get a win. Not a tie, a win this time. 76ers introduced their new head coach, Doc Rivers, today. The Flyers had a defenseman retire. How about that? Sports is rocking and rolling. Game night. Josh Hennig here on 97.3 ESPN. An interesting night ahead for the NFL. You can still hear Packers versus Falcons tonight on 97.3 ESPN. Coverage still begins at 7:30, but the game won't kick off until around 9 p.m. tonight to kind of leave a little bit of space between Patriots and Chiefs, which is kicking off around 7:05 tonight. So the NFL had an unplanned doubleheader due to this whole Cam Newton COVID positive testing situation. We have our first NFL head coach fired this year. Texans fired Bill O'Brien. How about them apples? I mean, that was bound to happen, right? I mean, Bill O'Brien, that guy, as soon as he became GM, the team started going sideways. And he didn't want the GM there. He was part of the reason they forced the GM out. He wanted power. He pushed for it. The owner gave it to him. The team went sideways. Of course he should be fired. It's just makes sense. So we got a lot to get to this hour here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. PlaySugarHouse.com. Text board is open. 609-403-0973 to get on the conversation. 609-403-0973. Tom Moore, sports columnist, Bucks County Courier-Times, longtime Sixers beat writer, also covers the Eagles for the paper. He will join us coming up at 6:20, talk about the Eagles win and Doc Rivers the next day. I don't know about you guys, but it kind of feels like the Sixers are taking full advantage of it being Doc Rivers as the new head coach. They're trying to steal as many headlines and eyeballs as possible. And I don't blame them. Doc Rivers is probably the biggest name hire for the 76ers since Larry Brown, I would assume. I mean, he's certainly a bigger name than Brett Brown Maurice Cheeks is a big name, but he wasn't a big coaching name. He was just known as a former player. Most of the coaches in this town are either retreads or has-beens or nobodies before they got here. Since Larry Brown, so it's a big deal. So we got a lot to get to with Tom Moore coming up about 16 minutes from now. But I can't get away from this Eagles win last night. And I've seen some of the comments out there by people about this team. Can we just admit that it's nice they got a win? I don't understand why it's so hard for some people to accept that. You're beat up. The 49ers are beat up. You got the win. You found a way. Isn't the name of the game you play to win the game? We've heard that clip from Herm Edwards about 1 million times in our sports life, right? So why is it that when the Eagles get a win, we have to pick at it, second guess it, rip it apart? It's really a shame that some people just can't enjoy winning. And it's amazing that we're talking about the Sixers because it reminds me how many times during the season Sixers won a game. Brett Brown brought in, why did he bring in Raul Neto with 9 minutes left in the fourth quarter, right? Or if the Sixers got a win, it was, Ben Simmons still didn't shoot a three, but they won the game. Doc Rivers brought this up during his press conference. He said, listen, when Joel and Ben are on the floor, 65% of the games are on the floor, they win. And it's like, which is more important? Is it winning over losing, or is it the aesthetics of the game? And that's what's really frustrating at times. I'm watching that Browns-Cowboys game yesterday, and all I kept thinking was, man, the Cowboys' defense is horrible. Man, the Browns have great play calling. Baker Mayfield is on fire. Odell Beckham's having a great game. Dak's doing his best to get his team back into the game. And yet some people are more focused on how bad the Cowboys defense played than how well the Browns offense played. It's like they don't want to give the Browns credit. Well, you should give the Browns credit. Because guess what? The Browns have a legitimate head coach for the first time in how long? and they actually look like a decent football team. See, the Eagles went out there and said, it doesn't matter that we have Travis Fulgham as one of our wide receivers. It doesn't matter that they're double teaming Zach Ertz. It doesn't matter that we have basically a bunch of nobodies in our secondary outside of Rodney McLeod. It doesn't matter all the problems we're facing. We are going to play to win this game, and we are going to fight. And as far as I'm concerned, that's the most Philly thing ever. When all the chips are against you, when you're down on your luck, when your face is on the mat, when you're doing everything possible to try to get up back on your feet and you find a way to win, that's the Philly spirit. That's toughness. That's grit. That's desire. That's want to. I understand it wasn't a pretty win. But you don't go in there for aesthetics. It's like Dominic Toretto said in Fast and the Furious. It doesn't matter if you win by an inch or a mile. Winning's winning. And I got to give Doug Pederson credit. I got to give Jim Schwartz credit. I got to give Wentz credit. Wentz finally woke up for a little bit. I mean, that interception wasn't really his fault earlier in the game. He made some great plays. He got out of the pocket and ran with the ball. He didn't make bad throws. The one throw he threw out of bounds, I almost thought was going to be called an intentional grounding because of the fact that the way he flung it, I wasn't sure if he was out of the tackle box. But Wentz made some great decisions yesterday. There was really only two bad throws the entire game. The throw to Richard Rodgers, which I still don't know why he floated it. It almost felt like he thought he was going to be Russell Wilson there for a second and just drop a dime in there. So strange. Such a strange throw. And then the other throw was the one that was picked off. He probably shouldn't have thrown it into the teeth of the defense for it to get batted down. But aside from that, I thought overall, Wentz played well. Doug Pederson made adjustments. He ran the ball more. He did the dink and dunk throws. He got back to the quick strike offense. He knew he had Jordan Mailata out there, so they didn't try to throw the ball deep every 5 seconds. All right, I'm good with that. And when they did throw deep to Travis Fulgham, guess what? They got a touchdown out of it. The defense played well. How about 2 straight weeks now? The Eagles' defense has actually gotten pressure on the quarterback. It's so nice to see that, right? It's nice to see a quarterback get banged around a little bit. Think about it. Last week, you had 18 hits on the quarterback. This week, the Eagles had 15 hits, and 5 of them were by Gerard Avery. How about that? I mean, that dude was like being shot out of a cannon, the way they were using him in like that Joker blitzer role. I got to give the team credit. They found a way to win. Now, I don't think they're going on a winning streak right now. As I said on Saturday, on Sports Bash Saturday, I expected them to win on Sunday against the 49ers and then lose the next 2. Because the Steelers and the Ravens are probably 2 of the best teams they're going to face in their entire schedule. The entire schedule. The only other great team on their schedule is the Seahawks. The majority of the other teams are either just a little bit better or somewhat better than them. They're not significantly better. So once you get past the Steelers and the Ravens, you have a chance to kind of salvage the season. It just feels so weird that tie is going to come back and help them out. So weird. PlaySugarHouse.com text board is open, 609-403-0973 to get on the conversation here on 97.3 ESPN. Reminder, coming up about 10 minutes from now, we'll be joined by Tom Moore, sports columnist for the Bucks County Courier-Times. Covers the Eagles and the Sixers, a longtime Sixers beat writer. He asked a great question to Doc Rivers earlier today, so I want to ask him about that question and more coming up after 6:20 tonight. But we'll get your text messages right now, 609-403-0973 for the PlaySugarHouse.com text board. Texter says, GM Bill got Coach Bill fired. GM Bill ruined the franchise until 2022 at the very least. Listen, you're right. And I have never been a believer in the head coach being a GM. And I know people love to point to Bill Parcells saying, you got to let me buy the groceries and all that kind of the old saying. But there's a reason why I never ask my GM to make a play call on 3rd and long, right? Doesn't matter how great the GM is. Doesn't matter if it's when Ozzie Newsome was in down in Baltimore. Doesn't matter if it's John Lynch in San Francisco. It doesn't matter if it's any of these guys. I want my GM to build the team, run the team, take care of the salary cap. I want my coach to coach. And the fact that Bill O'Brien worked so hard. I mean, people forget how adversarial his relationship was with Ryan Smith near the end, and how he wanted to get Nick Caserio down there for the Patriots organization. And when the Patriots blocked Caserio from taking the interview, that Bill O'Brien went to the owner and was like, just make me in charge. And they did, and the whole team has gone sideways. And you're right, Texter. He's ruined the franchise. He's totally crippled them in certain ways financially with the contracts he gave, the Laramie Tunsil and Deshaun Watson. Not that you don't pay those two guys. You need to pay your left tackle and your franchise quarterback. But the way he went about it was just so haphazard. And the fact that he couldn't get along with DeAndre Hopkins, I mean, DeAndre Hopkins is so low on the list of diva receivers, and you can get along with him. Isn't that a reflection on you and not the receiver? I mean, it's such a mess. Such a mess. 609-403-0973 is the text board. Dexter says, here we go again. Week-to-week genius of Pederson, Wentz, and the Eagles look like another 8-8 season with a lot of excuses. Well, no. This is not a week-to-week thing, okay? I can't speak for other people on other shows, on other stations, on other podcasts, okay? What I say from week to week is what I see. It's not that Doug Pederson is a genius. It's that Doug Pederson did a much better job yesterday than the previous 3 weeks. Doesn't make him a genius, Dan and EHT. Wentz still looked like garbage for the first 2 weeks of the season. He still has the same number of interceptions this year that he had in total the last 3 seasons, okay? I'm not letting that go. This is not a week-to-week, here we go again. But you got to give credit where credit is due. You got to give credit when someone does something well. You can't diss on somebody all the time just because you're not happy with everything. Nobody's saying that this is a great team. If anybody's saying that Doug Pederson is a genius today, they're out of their doggone mind. And I understand what you're saying, Dan, from EHT. You're saying, look, this is pro football. We can't be happy going 8-8. I get that. I totally hear you, Dan, from EHT, but I'm not saying be happy. I'm saying give credit. What I'm saying is this is a team that basically has a bunch of practice squad players on the field. You know, Alex Singleton is not a starting linebacker in the NFL. There's a reason. He's on special teams each and every week. Is he probably better than what you have out there? He may be. You know, listen, the guy was a CFL Defensive Player of the Year. Maybe you need to give him more time, more snaps on defense. But do you know why Jalen Mills played 100% of the Eagles snaps yesterday? Because they have no one else. They have no one else. So I get it. You can expect more. This is not excuses. This is reality I'm dealing with. And by the way, the 49ers were without 3 of their best pass rushers yesterday. No Solomon Thomas, no Nick Bosa, no D Ford. So you had Jordan Mailata, you had Jack Driscoll for half the game, you had Nate Herbig, you had Matt Pryor, all surrounding a veteran in Jason Kelsey at different points of time, going against mostly backups and 1 first-round pick. You don't hear me getting up here praising them for doing an amazing job. I will give Mailata credit, the fact that he only had 2 bad plays the entire night. He was respectable out there. He did okay. But part of the reason why the offensive line did okay was because Doug Pederson also said, I'm going to get the ball out of Carson Wentz's hands as often as possible. I'm going to run the ball. I'm going to do quick hitters. I'm going to tell Wentz to check down. And by the way, Wentz did. You got to give him credit for that. It's not about genius. This is not about you know, excuses, being happy with 8-8. But you got to give credit to people when credit is due. 609-403-0973. Joey D. in Ventnor, last text in here before we hit the break, says, Wentz has his struggles, but do you think we need to give him a lot more credit? He showed a lot of toughness and grit last night. At some point, he even carried them to a victory. Let's not forget, we could have Dwayne Haskins or Gardner Minshew week after week. It's Joey D. in Ventnor. Well, it gets back to something I was saying last week, Joey D., and that is there's a perception at times because there are certain people who are so hyper-focused on Carson Wentz that they think that the rest of the league's quarterbacks are so much better. And I believe you were the one who brought up the question of how many quarterbacks in the league would you take over Wentz? And I said, frankly, maybe only 10. Because at the end of the day, there's so many quarterbacks in this league who you could pick apart just as much as Wentz. It's not like Derek Carr is going out there lighting up the world each and every week. Jared Goff has had some rough moments this year. Look at yesterday, by the way. Who's the better quarterback yesterday? Well, it looked like Teddy Bridgewater for more than the majority of that game in Carolina, right? There are multiple times throughout this season that you can look at other quarterbacks and just rip them apart. It's not like Matt Ryan's making the perfect throw each and every down. Deshaun Watson's had some really rocky points this year. So I think that we got to give Wentz credit when he does well, and we got to criticize him when he doesn't play well. You're right. We could have Dwayne Haskins, and we all could be pulling our hair out even more so than we already do. Now, Gardner Minshew would be fun. At least he'd be fun and interesting. And I'm not saying you'd win any more games with Minshew. I think Minshew has limitations as a quarterback, but he'd be fun. I know Carson Wentz isn't very fun. He's very, I go to work, I go home, I spend time with my wife and my kid and my dog, and, I go to church and, tell the world that Jesus loves them, and I'm very bland and I'm not very exciting and interesting. I get that. That's who Wentz is, but doesn't make him a horrible quarterback. It just means that he has shortcomings and limitations too. We got a lot of texts to get to, and we'll get to all of you coming up throughout the show. 609-403-0973 to get on the conversation. Coming up next, Tom Moore, sports columnist, Bucks County Courier-Times. We're getting the Eagles and the Sixers next here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Seattle City.
You're listening to Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
We'll get back to your text in just a bit. 609-403-0973, theplaysugarhouse.com text room. But joining us now on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline, he is Tom Moore, sports columnist for the Bucks Courier-Times. We'll get into some Eagles, get into some Sixers as well. Busy day in Philadelphia sports here in the region. Tom, how you doing on this Monday?
Oh, I'm fine, Josh. It's been a busy time. I think I've had 7 columns in the last 8 papers, so a lot to write about with mainly the Sixers and some Phillies news and the Eagles. So yeah, there's a lot going on for an October where usually we don't have as much happening right now. It's pretty much all Eagles, and that's it.
Let's start with the Eagles because I want to ask you the question I put out there a little bit earlier in the show, which was, for me, I watched the game yesterday, and I feel like, look, I'm not saying that Wentz and Pederson are amazing right now, but I felt that they both did better on Sunday night than they've done in previous weeks. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I agree. I would agree. I thought the game plan was better. It was more mixed with the running and the passing, even though the running really didn't work that well, in the first half. But I think at least there was a commitment to stick to it. It wasn't drop back every time. And, there were stretches where you had 4 guys starting on the line who weren't regular starters. It was just Jason Kelsey and 4 guys who should be backups or who were backups. And Wentz, he looked to run the ball a little bit, which he's gotten away from before. He used to run too much, and then McNabb did the same thing where they kind of get in that mode where, they don't want to, they try to avoid it, and they become strictly drop-back passers. But he looked to run a little bit, which they needed, with all those new wide receivers. And, he had a decent game, certainly his best, better than the 2 previous weeks, with just an absolute makeshift group of receivers. So, yeah, I thought the 49ers were a little banged up, and I was really surprised how well, the backup quarterback came in, just moved him right down the field and, had a little bit more time. It could have been trouble there. But, yeah, it was a solid performance and by Wentz and Pederson, and I don't think you could say that the last 2 weeks. You could call their performances a bunch of adjectives, but solid was not one of them.
You mentioned Donovan McNabb, and I think back to all the injuries that McNabb dealt with as well, and yet he still finished his career with 5 NFC Championship appearances, and he won the most games of the quarterback in franchise history. So, if at worst the best Wentz ever is Donovan McNabb, I feel like the Philadelphia franchise could do a lot worse.
Yeah, I mean, well, you look at the the Bengals and look at so many of these other franchises. I mean, they thought Andy Dalton was the guy, and they gave him whatever it was 4 or 5 years, and it clearly didn't work out. And now they have a good young quarterback in Joe Burrow. But stability at quarterback, a franchise quarterback, is so essential because if you don't have it, you have to try to manufacture it, acquire guys late in their careers. Rent a guy for a year or two. Fitzmagic is a perfect example of that. He's been anywhere and everywhere, and he's an ideal guy if you need a stopgap for a year. But you really need somebody you can sort of build around, who can have a 10-plus year career and, can really just solidify that position and give you one less question mark, at an absolutely essential position.
I know the Eagles were dealing with guys from the practice squad like Travis Fulgham and Adrian Killens last night, but how much of a concern is it for the team moving forward of the issues when it comes to getting talent consistently, not just in the draft, but in terms of just building the roster with guys who we know are going to be on the field each week?
Yeah, I think they're having a little bit of the same problem that Andy Reid had late in his tenure here, where they had let some veterans leave or veterans retired, so on, and it was that next man up mentality. But you went from Brian Dawkins to Quentin Michael, and when you do too many of those things, you lose personality. I mean, they don't seem to have a lot of playmakers on defense. They did make some plays last night, which is one of the reasons why they won. But they really don't seem to have a lot of playmakers and a lot of personalities. And I think the same thing happened, with Andy Reid late and, with, especially at the linebacker position. Now, Singleton made a huge play, and I would expect him. Nate Gary just seems to get beat like a drum, and he goes after those ball fakes, play action all the time. I would think that maybe Singleton earned a right to get some more reps there, based on, what he did. They let guys like Nigel Bradham, and I understand later in the career they want more money and so on. But, he was a playmaker. He was the guy you could plug in there, and he would make 10 tackles a game for you, or 9 tackles a game, whatever it was. So if you have too many situations like that and too much erosion, I think that you see some of the things that happened, with the Eagles now, and it happened, late in Andy Reid's tenure here.
Tom Moore joining us here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN, on Twitter at Tom Moore Philly. Tom, you mentioned the defense, and I got to ask you, this defense, 18 hits on the quarterback last week, 15 last night. It seems like that defensive front is finally kind of woken up a little bit, because it felt like for the first couple of weeks you were kind of wondering, is anybody really out there aside from maybe a little bit of Brandon Graham and a little bit of Malik Jackson?
Yeah. I think some of those guys, the defensive end position especially has been much better than it was. I think those guys were underperforming a bit, early on, and that should be one of the strengths of the team. I really think so, and it almost has to be, as I said, with the question marks at linebacker and the secondary. You got to get a lot of pressure on the quarterback, to increase the chances that you're going to win. So I thought last night, and really, I guess the week before, I believe they had 8 sacks. So the last 2 weeks, they've been much more active and aggressive, and making plays, which is what the defense desperately needs them to do.
Tom, let's flip it over to the Sixers, because Doc Rivers had his press conference today, and I thought your question to him was an incredible question, because it allowed people to really get a unique level of insight into the person of Doc Rivers. So if you could just kind of give the audience a little, kind of repeat of what the question was and Doc's answer, because I felt that, learning more about Doc Rivers, the person behind the coach, is really going to even more endear him to the Philadelphia, the city, and the fan base.
Yeah, I just said, first of all, that the first time I asked him a question was 30 years earlier, when I was doing a story on Mo Cheeks, and back when I used to travel, and he played for the Hawks, and I asked him about Mo, and he said that he was his all-time favorite player. And then I said, beyond winning a championship, what's something you've accomplished in your coaching career, that you really something that you're really stands out in your mind. And he talked about some different things. Hello?
Yeah, you're still with us.
Yeah, okay, sorry. I just switched. I was walking around and I got in my car, so I was waiting for the dash to pick up. Yes. He talked about his first year in Orlando when they were projected to be one of the worst teams in the league and ended up going 500 back in the Grant Hill, Tracy McGrady days. And last year with the Clippers, this year with great expectations, lost in the second round of the playoffs, but just, some of the adversity and the pressure. And he talked about the whole sports science thing with the load management. He's an incredible. I wrote something last week. I've covered the league for 32 years, and he's the best coach in terms of answers with the media and just getting it, understanding what's going on, giving you what you need, and then some in that respect. And Brett Brown was very good, don't get me wrong, but Doc is at another level in terms of just his answers, and he always seems to have a perennially raspy voice. He's always on the verge of losing his voice or has lost his voice or whatever. But just a really interesting guy, very charismatic. I think the fans will really like him. And I think, most importantly, he's going to hold Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid accountable. He's going to encourage Ben to shoot those mid-range shots. I don't care about three-pointers, but open mid-range shots are really important. And Joel to lose a little bit of weight, get in excellent shape, and have a career year here, something that he's shown flashes of, but, has always had something nagging or whatever going into the playoffs.
You mentioned Ben and Joel, and I thought that was an interesting point that, Doc brought up a couple times that he said, listen, I came here because of the players who are here. He mentioned that, when Ben and Joel on the floor, they win 65% of the time. And it reminded me of what Elton had said previously. He said, listen, we want to keep Ben and Joel here. We're not looking to trade these guys. And it seems like that Elton found a coach who has the same desire to work with these guys and see what they can do.
Yeah, Doc Rivers understands the importance of talent. If you don't have talent, you have to try to somehow manufacture a way to win or be successful. So you've got, one of the two or three best centers in the league, should be the best center in the league, but you can make cases for two other guys, I would say. And you have Simmons, and he was asked, is he a point guard? Is he a point forward? Is he a power forward? He said, he's really into positionless basketball. He's into, you put five guys out there and you kind of figure it out. You find guys that can score. You spread the ball. You find the open guy. That kind of thing. And you take your shot with those guys. He raved about Shake Milton, who had a monster game out in L.A. against the Clippers when the Sixers were shorthanded. He coached Tobias Harris, who had his best season before he was traded here a year and a half ago. So it's almost 2 years ago now. So yeah, he's got some familiarity with the players here, and now he needs to maximize, their abilities and take them on a run beyond the second round of the playoffs.
Tom Moore, Bucks County Courier-Times. Follow him on Twitter at Tom Moore Philly. Of course, he's been covering the Sixers for many years now. Check out all of his work over at the Bucks County Courier-Times, on Twitter at Tom Moore Philly. Talking Eagles, Sixers, and more. And as all guests, he appeared today on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Tom, always appreciate the time and take care.
Sure, you too. Anytime, Josh.
Josh Hennig, Game Night here on 97.3 ESPN, being brought to you by GMS Law. Make the right call. With 4 convenient locations to serve you, visit them online at gmslaw.com. Text board coming up next, 609-403-0973. To get on the conversation, I see them all loading up, so we're going to knock out as many as possible. Coming up on the other side, also accountability time for Josh. I got the sheet here of what I said on Friday's show, and we'll run it back a little bit to see where I was right, where I was wrong. A little accountability time for yours truly here on 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, powered by First Bank of Sea City. Download the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, not just to listen to the station, but all the news on the Eagles, Sixers, Phillies, and Flyers right there on the 97.3 ESPN mobile app.
Now, more Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Don't forget tonight's Monday Night Football. We got Packers-Falcons tonight. Coverage begins at 7:30. Still kickoff at 9, so you got an hour and a half full of NFL jam-packed recap and review of the weekend coming up tonight on 97.3 ESPN. Lead you into Packers versus Falcons. We'll get back to the text board in just a moment. 609-403-0973 with PlaySugarHouse.com. Text board, place your legal sports bets at PlaySugarHouse.com. Sign up now. They'll match your first deposit up to $250. Must be 21 or older to play. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Got a bunch of texts. And listen, before I read these texts, I love the fact that some of you are calling me to task about how I'm verbalizing this. Because honestly, if you didn't, I'd be concerned about some of you. So I like that. So I'm going to read all of these criticisms and these critiques. 609-403-0973. First texter, and I appreciate today's compliments you threw my way, says, did you watch all of Wentz's throws? He throws didn't need any receivers full 10 feet in front of him. He threw it at their knees, at their feet. If you watch the tape the last 2 games, his throws are all over the place. Texter goes on to say that he's a great quarterback talent-wise. I'm not dissing him, but you got to watch the tape. There's something wrong here mechanically. He was not on yesterday, not at all. Well, again, what I'm saying is that he looked horrible for 3 weeks, aside from one drive, right? There was the 1.5 drives in the Bengals game. He looked better. Yesterday, he looked way more efficient. Listen, his completion percentage on the year going into last night was around 59%. Last night, he was around 64% completion percentage. That's a huge upgrade. Let's not forget about the fact that he had a better quarterback rating last night. He had a higher yards per target, yards per catch last night. He also running the ball took him out of position to make less bad throws. Yeah, he had 10 incompletions last night. And of those 10 incompletions, 9 of them were absolutely unacceptable throws. But he made 18 other completions. Yes, there is something wrong mechanically with him. I would argue there might be even something psychologically wrong with him. But what Doug Pederson did with Wentz yesterday was incredibly impressive. He said, listen, I'm not going to ask you to win the game. I'm not going to ask you to make every throw. I'm going to ask you to throw the ball away in certain situations, which he did. I'm going to ask you to run the ball if the pressure gets too much, which he did. I'm going to ask you to hit the guy underneath at times, which he did. The receiver with the most receiving yards last night was Travis Fulgham. That was only because of the deep ball. Otherwise, every receiver on the team, 38 yards, 35 yards, 30 yards, 22 yards, 9 yards. That's because he just wasn't going deep. And I don't know if it's he's not reading the field properly. I think it's more than just mechanics. You bring up the mechanics, Texter. I think it's more than the mechanics because to me, if it was just mechanics, he would make some better decisions. But he's not making good decisions at times either. I've come on here and ripped him almost every Monday the last 3 weeks. But he played better yesterday. And maybe it wasn't significantly better. Maybe it wasn't leaps and bounds better. But better is better. And I have to give him credit for that. 609-403-0973 on the PlaySugarHouse.com text board. It says, Josh, how can you say Wentz looked good? His best throw was the touchdown. The rest of them were low at the knees. The others were overthrown by 4 feet. Did you watch the game? I'm not dissing Wentz, but obviously there's a mechanical problem. Again, another person points to the mechanical problem. Again, he looked good compared to where he looked the previous 3 weeks. I think some of you are getting a little hung up on how I verbalized it. I don't think what I said was wrong at all, because what I'm saying is that Wentz actually looked better. He looked good compared to the previous 3 weeks, where the first 2 weeks he looked like absolute garbage and he should have been pulled from the game. And if it wasn't for the fact that our backups are Nate Sudfeld, who the team obviously doesn't trust enough to be the backup. He's more so for a break glass in case of emergency. And an inexperienced Jalen Hurts, who has basically only NFL experience is running special plays. He doesn't really have any NFL experience. Maybe they would have benched Wentz in the Rams game, right? Maybe he would have been benched at the end in the Washington game. I don't know. Maybe the quarterback was Josh McCown or Nick Foles. They would have done that. Wentz has talent. Wentz played better yesterday. But you all are right. I'm not saying you're wrong. But I think that coming out of that game, there's a little bit too much negativity. I think that there's a little bit too much attitude of, oh, this didn't happen and that didn't happen and this. If you look around the NFL, the Denver Broncos won a game with Brett Rippon throwing 3 interceptions. Carson Wentz is better than Brett Rippon. He's better than Jeff Driscoll. He's better than a good amount of these quarterbacks in the league. And it's not an excuse, and it's not settling. It's just admitting the facts in front of us. And listen, maybe the future is Jalen Hurts, right? Maybe Jalen Hurts one day will be the Eagles quarterback, and you'll trade Carson Wentz to Indianapolis like some people have inferred, right? Maybe Wentz does end up with Frank Reich in Indy, and he has a nice career, and then you have Jalen Hurts, and he has a really good career. Maybe that's the case. But we got to wait and see. We got to see how this thing plays out. 609-403-0973 is the text board to get on the conversation. 609-403-0973. Dan from EHT followed up about the point about the talent. He says, how in the world is it possible the Eagles don't have talent? It's not true. Everyone makes like the Eagles have guys who are bagging groceries last week. The Eagles do have talent, and they're not garbage. We need to be better than 8-8 and not hearing injuries and bad drafts as excuses. Well, I think that you're kind of conflating the point here, Dan from EHD, because, number one, the Eagles, everybody who plays in the NFL has talent, okay? This is something that Eric Davis brought up last week on the Sports Bash with Mike Gill and Hunter Brody. He said, everyone in the league has talent. Everyone is fast and strong and quick and athletic. It's not that the Eagles don't have talent, because talent itself is a word that's all-encompassing. It covers a lot of territory. It covers a lot of ground. The Eagles don't have high-level talent. When you don't have Deshaun Jackson, Alshon Jeffrey, Jalen Reagor out there, you lose the 3 most talented wide receivers on your roster. So the talent of the people on the field is lesser than who should be on the field if it wasn't for injuries. So that's not an excuse. That's an admitting of the facts of reality. And it's not that the Eagles players are garbage. It's that the players that they have are not sufficient for winning football games. You mentioned an 8-8 record. 8-8 records are not just on quarterbacks. They're on everybody on the team. Okay? It's a team sport at the end of the day. There's a reason why Dan Marino never won a Super Bowl. And it's not because he's garbage or he's a lesser quarterback. It's because Dan Marino's teams he was on just were not good enough. Think about Dan Marino's career. Dan Marino After the year he threw for all those yards, right? The first couple of years, the second and third year when he was an all-pro and he was one of the best in the league and had 4,000, 5,000 passing yards, 48 touchdowns, etc. You know what his record was for the next few years? 8-8, 7-5, 6-10, 8-8. That's a 4-year stretch. That's Dan Marino. That's a Hall of Famer. That's one of the best quarterbacks of all time. Do you think that 8-8, 7-5, 6-10, 8-8 run in the late 80s was all Dan Marino's fault? If you do, your view of football is flawed. Dan Marino played with some mediocre rosters at times. Dan Marino was not always playing on a great football team. Now, from 1990 on, the team got a little better. 12-4, 8-8, 11-5. Then he got injured. Then he came back. They were 10-6 and 9-5. But then he kept not being healthy. 7-6, 9-7, 10-6 records down the stretch. I think every single Eagles fan would take Dan Marino over Carson Wentz in a heartbeat. If we could go back in time and steal Dan Marino from the past and bring him to the present and said, Carson Wentz, you're off the team, Dan Marino is in, you'd all take it in a heartbeat. But guess what? Dan Marino has a bunch of 8-8 seasons on his record. He has what here? 1, 2, 3. He has 3 different seasons where he was 8-8. He has a couple more seasons where he was 9-7. He has a season where he went 6-10. Don't look at Carson Wentz's record and act like it's a indictment, or Doug Pederson's record as an indictment of the whole thing. The Eagles have talent. It's just not elite talent. And until they have better talent on the roster, whether it's through the draft or through free agency, they will only ever be so good. They have limitations. It is what it is. So when I give Doug Pederson and Carson Wentz and Jim Schwartz and Gerald Avery and Malik Jackson and Derek Barnett and Travis Fulgham and Jordan Mailata credit as part of the reasons why they won yesterday, is not because I'm settling, it's not because I'm content, it's because I'm saying when you win a game, there's a reason why you win a game, and someone deserves credit, just like someone deserves credit when you lose a game. And when they lose the next 2 games against the Steelers and the Ravens, remember that. 609-403-0973 is the text board. Texter says, the Eagles wide receivers stink. The corners stink. This is 2020. You need to be able to have those players. You're right. You're running out there Travis Fulgham. Travis Fulgham. John Hightower, I don't even know where he is half the game. Sometimes I hit the rewind button to see where the guys are lined up on the field. I do that a lot, by the way. I hit the pause button, I hit rewind, I rewatch from play to play. That's why, it's hard for me to really, react in real time at times, because I want to say, hold on, did I see what I just saw? And while I'm rewinding and rewatching the game, there's times that I'm like, where is John Hightower? Is he even on the field? Some of these guys, they don't even get looks by Wentz because Wentz can't trust them. The quarterback situation, everyone's injured at this point. Avonte Maddox and Trevor Williams and Craig James. You had Crevan LeBlanc out there. You moved Jalen Mills from safety to cornerback. Yeah, you're right. The corners of the wide receiver situation is extremely frustrating, and it's a huge problem. And you're not going to win a Super Bowl with this roster. You're just not. I love the text. I love all you getting on my case and wanting to argue with me. 609-403-0973 is the text board. PlaySugarHouse.com text board. Game night here on 97.3 ESPN. Wrapping up the hour. Of course, don't forget Game Night being brought to you by Matt Black Kia. Matt Black Kia wants to get you approved today. That's Matt Black Kia on the Black Horse Pike in Egg Harbor Township. Accountability time. Got the sheet here. Got the notes. College football on Saturday. What a wild day. We went 6-2. Not bad. Not bad at all. Nice little bounce back. Overall record now is up to 22-13. Bouncing back from a 2-5 week to a 6-2 week is not bad. I told you all I was going to go a little crazy. Listen, sometimes it's boom or bust. Sometimes you look at a game, you look at a weekend, you get excited, and sometimes it gets the best of you, and sometimes it doesn't. Where was I wrong? Texas Tech, Kansas State. What was going on in the Big 12 on Saturday? It felt like they had 2 million penalties in every single game. Texas Tech lost their starting quarterback, Alex Bowman. He couldn't play the majority of the game. He was injured. And they had the backup in there. I still have no idea what that guy's name is or where he came from. Texas Tech had a rough night. They did. It is what it is. So guess what? They didn't hit the over 64.5. In fact, they barely hit 50. It was a rough night. K-State got the win at home, which probably would have been the better pick, honestly, right? You know what I was wrong about? Navy. Nobody knew before till game time that the Navy's quarterback wasn't there. I didn't know. You didn't know. Nobody knew. There's almost 20 guys missing from Air Force's team. They found a way to win at home because Navy had their backup quarterback in and they couldn't get a lick of anything done in that game. I mean, that game, I couldn't watch the second half of the game. I was so exasperated. Where did we hit? Tennessee beat Missouri, minus 11.5. Got it. TCU and Texas hit the over thanks to a safety. A safety! The game ended on a safety. That was ridiculous. SMU, they pulled away from Memphis, got the win thanks to a field goal. Guess what? They were +2 when I grabbed it. They won by 3. Nice work. Texas A&M, Alabama, like I told you, Alabama crushed them. Ole Miss won outright at Kentucky, so 6-2. The 2 were pretty bad. 6 were pretty good. Coming up tonight on 97.3 ESPN, Packers-Falcons should be a high-scoring game. 7:30 coverage starts.